Invisible person is the third option, and what that means is that someone from outside the immediate organization, they may be within the same company, they may be from outside the company, but it's the idea that management is thinking they need to do a reboot or a refresh of the team, so they're going to bring in some expertise from outside, and by doing so, the goal is to find somebody that's got skills, and then you face the challenges of integrating them in with an existing team. So yardstick is the final method by which a company will choose a measure, and yardstick means they're using actual metrics to figure out what they need and what they want to do. I will admit that most companies do not do this. Really, if you're talking about how you get here, one of the first three choices is usually how someone gets promoted into management. But for most IT managers, we start in the trenches. We're usually the best operator. We usually have some seniority. We might have had some experiences as a formal team lead, but what that leads to is a clash between your job title and your job expectations, right? If the company promoted you into management because you were the best operator, what they're expecting is that you're going to continue to have those same sort of technical successes and pass those skill sets on to someone else. If you're coming into management blind from the trenches, you might have your own personal expectations that the team is automatically going to adopt your processes, your procedures, your ways of doing things. It gives you an opportunity to kind of expand your influence and expand your capabilities. But in reality, management is the accomplishment of predetermined objectives through others. And I want you to stop and think about that, because really, if you're a best operator, the tendency is that when you walk into management, you're going to start trying to get things done the way you've always done things, and really trying to get people up to your level. And really, the goal is that you want to delegate. You want to manage the people, not the production. And by that I mean your goal is to continue to move the business forward, but you need to figure out how to marshal resources into getting them to accomplish these goals for you without you necessarily having to tie up all of your time in leading the charge. It's very difficult at times for new technical managers to learn to give up some of the technical hands-on aspects of the job. So the second major part of this definition is that when you talk about the accomplishment of predetermined objectives, that automatically implies change, and change management becomes a very important aspect of management in general. And we'll talk more about that later, but you need to understand that the goal of management is delegation and change. So when I look at so what I wanted to do was kind of look at these things, the title versus the job responsibility, and talk about the difference between a team lead and management. So a team lead perspective goes right along with what we were thinking originally, is that the company expects you as a DBA or some other IT professional to continue being a DBA or an IT professional, but motivate other people to elevate them to your level of success. On the other hand, management means, really you want to maintain the technical results, and you want to motivate your team in terms of efficiency and effectiveness, but the goal is not to make them clones of yourself. The goal is to make them the best DBAs, technical people that they can be. Your personal expectations, likewise, if you go into management from a team lead perspective, it's going to be that the team's going to adopt your processes, and you're going to expand your influence and expand capabilities. You have to shift gears to be thinking like a manager and start thinking of what are the personal expectations. You want to focus on results, not methods. You want to focus on building relationships and defining what the appropriate responsibilities are for everyone. So, moving forward. So, to accomplish this, one of the things that I challenge myself to do, and I challenge most new managers when I talk to them, is I want you to think and act like a good developer. And what I mean by that is that what makes a good developer? We first have to answer that question. Well, for me, if I'm looking at hiring a developer or a DBA, and granted, I've got mostly a development background, before I became an operational DBA. So these things are true, and I'm going to use these concepts independently of each other. But really, as a developer, I always had a desire to learn, right? My work was an extension of a hobby. Most developers I know got into development because they were interested in coding and did something and then got some training and then eventually made a career out of it. But the idea is that you should enjoy what you do and want to learn more and push yourself more. So if I'm looking at hiring a good developer, that's one of the characteristics I'm going to look for, is that whole desire to learn. The second thing I always look for is a desire to collaborate. You learn from debates, and you can build networks around technology. People, obviously, you're tuning into a professional development group. You probably belong to some other group in the past, but you've reached down and begun to build those networks of people that you know and trust and have some influence and some interaction with. That's awesome. So when I start looking at hiring somebody, those are two key characteristics I look for: desire to learn, desire to collaborate. The third one is desire to. Good developers working on reading methods, build frameworks and things, by saving the most time that they can. All three of those can be shifted, same trait, but a different focus. So as a manager, you still don't have that same desire to learn. You still want to demonstrate it. Try to read a management book every quarter. Move slightly away from technical skills and start looking at how do you improve people skills? How do you build relationships? How do you understand the business? There's a couple of podcasts that I enjoy and listen to quite frequently, Manager Tools and Wiley Manager. Both of them are great for new and even experienced managers, but they cover a lot of management concepts in terms of how you build people, how you build relationships, how you motivate people to do. They're not specifically IT related, but certainly the principles and the concepts can be expanded to do that. Yet, as a manager, you should have a desire to collaborate. Obviously, you're here, but there's also, most technical conferences are going to have a professional development track. As a manager, you may want to start investing some time in attending some of those courses and start building yourself professionally. Try to develop a buddy system and a user group. Reach out and find people to interact with that are in the same boat as you. Have been a manager about the same time. Look for mentors. Look for opportunities to talk about how do you motivate people to do things as opposed to getting things done by yourself. So the third trait is a desire for efficiency. And when we start talking about a desire for efficiency, as a manager, your focus really becomes more about workflow and processes of getting things done as opposed to doing things yourself. So there's three frameworks that I use currently. We're actually looking at picking up some more interesting ideas with DevOps. Some things have come along that are exciting and interesting in that realm. But the three that we've committed to in my day job that we talk about is Mars. We focus on Lean IT and Conman, and then also look at ITIL as well. So I kind of want to give just a high-level overview just so that you guys have sort of a reference point. And in reality, there's a lot of depth to these topics that's far beyond this particular discussion. But it gives us kind of an opportunity to discuss and think about things. So Mars is really a framework that I came up with, and really it's in response to just finding a way to classify the work that my department was responsible for. I made it DBA centric, but in reality it could be expanded to other ITs and even some development organizations. But the reality is that when I thought about these things, I was focusing primarily on database administrators. And what I've done is defined 4 areas of work. So anything that my team does falls into one of these 4 areas. Maintenance work, we do architecture work, we do research, and we do support. architecture is probably the one term that doesn't quite fit, because it's really more about infrastructure and resource planning, but MERS didn't sound as good as Mars, so I did what I could with what I could. So when I start talking about Mars, the whole idea is that that any amount of work that you do is gonna be either proactive or reactive. In other words, you're going to invest some time to head off a problem, or you're spending some time fighting the results of a previous problem. And depending on where you place your efforts in those terms of work, it's either going to have a delayed or an immediate impact. So in other words, maintenance work is proactive. If you spend some time tuning indexes, spend some time making sure that your statistics are up to date, if you spend some time making sure that your backup plans and maintenance plans are in place, that's proactive. It's going to reduce the amount of problems that you're going to have at a later date. But the impact that you're going to have is delayed. You're not necessarily going to see some immediate problem solving right there. With architecture, you can plan to add and escalate and add new resources, and the impact is going to be immediate. If you add new drives to your SQL servers, you're immediately going to see the impact of that in terms of drive space. You're going to, if you begin to plan for a data warehouse and implement that, you're going to immediately see some changes in that as well. On the reactive side, research is something that you do to learn something more about the technology, to figure some things out, and you're not always going to see an immediate impact to that. I know a lot of people have gotten in the habit of, let me just Bing something, or I use the Microsoft specific term there, but that is, if you run into a problem, you're immediately going to do some research. That's answering a problem, yes, but in reality, I don't consider that to be research. Research to me is taking time to study for a certification exam, or taking some time to investigate some new feature and really learning it, even though you may never use it. The benefit of that is that it may give you some ideas and some thoughts about how to do some things later. So, and finally, support is reactive. You're fighting a fire, and you're having to implement some sort of immediate solution. What happens is that if you begin to classify your work into one of these four areas, it begins to really allow you to see how much time your team is spending on immediate and reactive items. Support may be the core mission of your team, but it may not. And what happens is that you want to define what your core values are, and then you want to begin spending some time getting the balance to match what those core values are. Really, I prefer kind of a balanced approach where you're spending, equal parts and times in each of the four quadrants. I know some teams that spend an awful lot of amount of time in the support area, but really the goal is just to kind of get in depth and focus in on maintaining a balance that you've defined and that you've set. And all this tool does is just kind of gives you a visualization for that. So apart from ours, the next piece that I do is we use Conman pretty heavily in our group. Like I said, I came from a development background. The beauty of a Kanban board is that it very much resembles the sprint storylines, the scrums that we were used to doing. It flows with the whole agile methodology, even though in reality it's a very different set of values and thinking in terms of it. But the nice thing about a Kanban board is it begins to let you see where your effort is being spent and how much time is being spent there. This is obviously a blacked out version of a board that we've been using, and what we've done is just simply define that we have a to pile. So anything that we need to do gets put in the to do pile. Anything that my team is actively working on, they move it over to the doing pile. If they need to wait on somebody, like they're waiting on a resource from somebody else, we have a parts column for that. Other is it's a task that we feel that we've investigated and we really realize that this isn't something that we're supposed to do. And believe it or not, DBAs often get asked to do things that they're not supposed to do. I know that's a shock for some of you from a database background, but we often get pulled into the middle of a lot of problems that really have nothing to do with us whatsoever. And finally, I have my done pile, which is just a way of saying, hey, we've done this task and handed it off. We've run this particular query for a client. We've done such and such. So if you look at this particular snapshot of this board, I also color-coded my cards. And in reality, it's been a while since I've looked at these color codes. We've changed them since I've done this slide, so I'm not sure I could identify what the blue, yellow, and green ones are. But the red is all support. And what you can see is that I have a couple of guys that are very, very support-oriented. And so what happens is that when they get to work in the queue, they're immediately pulling the support items off and moving them into the done pile. This is a problem that I struggle with because, again, my team is very customer service oriented, and they see a problem. I think, oh, I can jump in and do it. And support items are usually quick and easy to do. Maintenance and architectural ones are not fun for most people. There's, again, because they're kind of the proactive behind the scenes work. People don't always see them. So this is but by having this visualization up there, it's very easy for me to see what the bottlenecks are, very easy for me to see what things are going on and what things are doing. The important thing to remember about Kanban is that it's very simple to implement a Kanban board, but there's a lot of theory and philosophy about it known as lean IT or lean thinking that really focuses more on improving processes, not just visualizing them. Kanban is all about visualizing what people are doing. But once you visualize, you need to take it to the next step and begin to improve it. So if you're thinking about doing Kanban or have already implemented Kanban, I encourage you to revisit it from time to time and start looking at it and saying, how can I improve this? Just looking again at this board, I've got an awful lot of cards in the weight pile. And what that tells me is that, things get thrown over the fence to us, we do some work on it, and then it's no longer a priority for the people that were originally working because we've got to wait on them to get back to us. So I've started working with other management teams to, figure out better ways to hand some of those items off, either whether we can mark them done or eliminate them or improve communication with the team so that we can move forward. But I wouldn't know that unless I found a way to visualize the actual cards. So ITIL. And ITIL is a very, very, very complicated topic. People spend years becoming ITIL masters. But the beauty of ITIL is that, first of all, the definition of ITIL is it's the Information Technology Infrastructure Library. It is a vocabulary, mostly, that allows you to define information technology processes from a business perspective. It's an extremely useful approach because it allows you to take a look at your work processes and figure out ways to convey them back to the business and teach them what you're doing and show them what you're doing. And then on top of that, you begin to really identify core problems and talk about service responsibilities and what gets delivered by whom, time frames. All of that is factored into the ITIL processes. The picture that I have right there is the very complex graph of ITIL version 3. And they continue to refine these. I think version 4 is supposed to drop in another 2 years. But as you can see, there's a lot of moving parts, a lot of moving pieces. I'm going to focus primarily on I really focus primarily on the issues of change management and support. Those are the pieces that we have implemented in our environment. We continue to look at service management and defining service level agreements. But the important thing is that this framework gives us an opportunity to discuss and talk about things. So, when I talk about the 3 frameworks that I'm looking at, we talk about the desire for efficiency, and the frameworks give me MARS, which lets me identify the core areas of responsibility that my team is supposed to be working on, see what we're spending our time on. Lean IT and Kanban give me kind of a day-to-day focus, a way to talk about specific issues and specific support cases that customers are working on. And then finally, ITIL is my opportunity to interact with other departments and talk about, well, how are we building a knowledge base and making things more self-service oriented? How do we implement change and make sure that other people are aware of it? So ultimately, the goal of all of this is figuring out how to change things in a system in a safe but efficient way. So
Stuart?
when we talk about all of this, though, yes.
Yeah, I just want to jump in because we have one question.
Sure.
We have a question. What app do you use for your Kanban board? I actually want to know that too.
There's several that I'm familiar with that I like a lot. The company that I work for that we use for Kanban, we cannot use cloud-based apps. That's one of the policies of working within our environment. So I rolled my own using SQL Server reporting services. So that particular visual that I have, let's see if I can go back to it. That's actual SSRS.
Wow.
So I'm pulling from our help desk database and reflecting it. So there's no drag and drop functionality there. If you're going to use Kanban, and everybody's on remotely, and you have
Stuart, can you repeat your two past sentences, because we really asked you for a few seconds.
Okay, I was going to say that we did this in SSRS and pulling it directly from our help desk database. If your team is all located together in the same place, everybody reports to an office. Probably the easiest thing to do to build a Kanban board is to just get a whiteboard and some Post-it notes, some sticky notes, and just begin to move processes across the board manually. That's the easiest way to get into it. If you're okay with using cloud services, there's several tools out there. My current favorite that I like right now is a tool called Kanban Flow. And the reason why I like Kanban Flow so much is because it has all of the elements of a Kanban board, including work in progress restrictions, as well as swim lanes and a number of other little goodies. I've also used Trello. I've used LeanKit, and all of them are good. But right now, my favorite, like I said, is Kanban Flow. So, that answer your question?
Yeah. Mickey also mentioned Jira, a tool called Jira. Yeah.
Okay.
Thank you.
So, let's see. Moving forward. So, we talk about change. We've talked about acting like a good developer. One of the things that I think that people struggle with, particularly if you were promoted as a best operator, is that your directs are not you, and you spend a lot of time developing processes, but you also need to focus on developing people. And the difference is because process development is going to improve your efficiency. It's going to make things repeatable. You're going to be able to report on it. You're going to be able to identify problems. But people development is going to improve effectiveness. Things like skill enhancement and ingenuity are invaluable to an organization in the long run. They take time. But the goal is that if you invest in people and not just processes, you're going to see a greater outcome than you ever did before. So as far as skills and strategies to work with people, first and foremost, I'm a big believer in investing in education. I think that sending people to user groups and to conferences is a great investment for a company to make. It's one of those things that as a manager you should argue for constantly, consistently, that you're going to need a research and education budget because you want to keep your engineer skills up to date. In day-to-day interaction, one of the strategies I use is answer with a question. And by that I mean, if an engineer comes to me and says, hey, I've got this problem, I don't know what to do about it, what do you think we should do? My immediate response is, well, what do you think we should do? and I turn it back on them, not because I'm playing a game with them, but the goal is that usually smart people, they just need a sounding board. They need somebody to be there to listen to an idea, to give them some feedback, to work through their ideas. And if you ask them what they should do, then the next piece of that is that if they begin to formulate an answer, you say, let's do that. Doesn't matter necessarily how wrong or right the answer is, but if you're really trying to push people to learn and push people to grow, you need to encourage them to act. So get them to come to you with a question if they have it, go to an action, and even if there's a failure associated with that action, they're learning and they're growing. Now, that's tough a lot of times for corporate to understand and expect that, hey, you want people to fail, but in reality, you want them to have some level of failure so they can learn and grow from it. You need to address failures. You need to talk about that when people don't meet the mark. How do you recover and how do you avoid those failures in the first place? But it's not reasonable to expect people to be perfect all the time. And in reality, you don't want them to freeze and not do anything because they're afraid of failing. You want them to be able to react quickly and move in it and do things and realize that there's consequences for failing, but there's rewards for acting and solving the problem. So you want to, ultimately, your goal is that you want to build engineers that were better than you ever were. And that is a tough thing for a lot of new managers to get their heads around, is that in reality, once you move into a management track, you are accepting the responsibility to build people that far exceed the skills that you have right now. And you have to begin to do that. So one of the things that I like to tell people is that you're not the model that you think you are. And the idea is that, first and foremost, technical people take a lot of pride in their work. You would not be doing the things that you do if you weren't proud of it. And a lot of best operators automatically assume that because you know how to do something and you take a lot of pride in it, it's the best way. It's a common attribute that if you've gotten to this point in where you become a manager, particularly because you're the best operator in a technology, it's because you're effective, you've gotten results done, you're confident in your work. But the goal is that you want to build that environment that fosters new best operators. And the way that you do that is you need to focus on results, not methods. And what I mean by that is that you want to be able to isolate outcomes from processes. You may know how to do something to get to a certain outcome. Your brand new engineer that wasn't trained on the legacy technology that you are and is coming in with a fresh perspective on things may know a completely different method to get to the same outcome. I think of things like, particularly from SQL Server, if you think about Profiler and extended events, right, that most of us that have been database administrators for some period of time working with SQL Server, our go-to product is Profiler. We know how to use that tool. We know how to get the things done that we want to with it. We know what the output is that we're expecting out of it. But as of SQL 2008, 2012, 2014, 2016, there's a bigger and bigger emphasis on using extended events as a new technology. And so what you're going to see is, particularly for newer DBAs, they're not going to have that experience with Profiler that we have. They're all going to be doing their work in extended events. It's a different methodology. You're getting to the same outcome, and in some cases it's a better outcome than what we're used to seeing with. But if you're a manager and a new DBA comes in and says, how do I do this? And your immediate response is, well, use this tool that I've been using for the last 15 years, that may not be the outcome that you want to do. You're not building your team. You're not motivating them to build on the skills that they're supposed to know how to do. So the temptation for new managers is really to force your methods on your team and to micromanage. And we all know that micromanagement is bad. However, it's, again, one of those things that we slip into and do. So one of the things that I suggest is that as a manager, you spend some time and you start defining your visions, your principles, and your goals. And what a vision, a principle, a goal does, a vision says, this is where we're going. The principle says, these are the standards we're going to live by, and the goals are the outcomes we desire. But you want to let your team focus on standards and methods. You also want to focus on assuming accountability. So once a team has defined their standards, these are the standard ways we're going to solve a problem. These are the methods that we're going to approach a problem with. You need to measure the team's performance using those standards and methods. If they're not sticking to those standards, you then have to define a process to say we either need to update the standards or we need to find a way to get you back in line with the standards that you agreed to. So the goal again is that as the manager's responsibility, managers are supposed to be doing visions, goals, and principles. We're gonna say this is the big picture. You let your team focus on the standards, the product that they're going to deliver, and the methods by which they're going to deliver that product. And then you have to overlap in areas and agree to talk about how you're going to measure that and how do you change to pull those things into one situation. So the next major principle that I want to say is that change is hard and you need to get over it. Change is one of those things that it really is tough. We want to change because, if we talk about our definition that it's management is the accomplishment of predetermined objectives through others. It's changed by definition. Once objectives is met, you're going to have new objectives. Once you do some maintenance work, you're going to have new goals for maintenance that you have to do. The temptation is to move into a situation and to just change everything in all at once. Particularly if you were the best operator and your previous manager left and now you've been promoted to management, you want to make everybody do everything the way that you have been wanting to do things all along. So there's a concept in a lot of management theory known as the change curve. And what the change curve is basically if you look at a team's efficiency and effectiveness, there's what they call the initial equilibrium, that your team's moving along at a steady pace of happiness, getting things done, effectiveness, etc. And then with every change you insert, there's this idea that there's what is known as the valley of despair. What the valley of despair is really the fact that productivity will plummet immediately after a change. Now, over time, hopefully, productivity will escalate back up to the new equilibrium, and you can implement another change and plunge to another valley of despair, and then keep moving upward over time. But the goal is that you need to keep change incremental. You need to give people time to adjust. You need to measure the impact of change. All of these things are important because people resist change. No change, no matter how well-intentioned and no matter how effective, is going to be well received by every member of your team. People are always going to want to revert back to the old ways of doing things. They're going to want to go back to being comfortable and doing things the way they need to do. So you need to be prepared for that. But you also need to be able to take a big picture and say, yeah, the way we've done things in the past works, but this is the more efficient and effective way. Give people time to adjust to that. Give people time to move and grow and adjust. So that being said, you have to start somewhere. And I love this picture because you got the bodybuilders and then you got this one guy that's obviously his first time in a competition. But you want to begin with doing something. And the something you should have is, first of all, you need to implement a set of metrics. When you start talking about change and start talking about implementing things, you find a way to measure where you're at right now. If you don't have a metric, just collect data. Find some piece of information that you want to collect, whether it's the number of cases open, whether it's the number of processes. It could be server specs, could be anything. But your goal is that you want to collect some information, and then in the first 6 months of a new position, you want to eliminate immediate fires. So the issues that are immediately flaring up and causing pain, you want to find a way to address those immediately. You want to implement your collection system, and you want to wait. And that waiting is important. I think a lot of times managers walk into a new situation and they want to change everything, and they want to measure something, and then they think, oh, this metric's bad, let me throw it out, and they keep changing their metrics every few months. Your goal is to implement some form of measurement and collect some information and let it accumulate over time. A bad metric with history is better than a good metric with no history, because at least with a bad metric over history, you can begin to see trends and begin to see time. I'm not saying that you always hang on to a bad metric, but you need to phase them out and make sure that if you're going to move to a different standard, spend some time collecting both bits of information and phase the old metric out as you begin to work into the new metric. It takes time to understand how change impacts your organization. You need to be able to invest in that and spend a little effort in doing that. So when it comes to measurement, the things that I talk about is you're going to need to define your core department service offerings. Again, for DBAs and IT administrators, I use the MARS framework for that. You want to identify who's responsible, who on your team is responsible for what, and when do they get things done, how do they get things done. You need to determine the critical nature of services that you're offering, because everything we do isn't always critical. Not everything is critical. There's some things that you can say, yeah, this is kind of a bonus. This is a feature that we've somehow gotten roped into doing, and you need to find a way to kind of eliminate those and get back to focusing on the core. Not necessarily stopping doing them altogether, but just reducing the priority on them, so that if a reporting server that gets rarely used goes down at the same time that your main database server that powers your OLTP application goes down, it's a system of triage. It's a way of figuring out what the important things are. Any service that you provide in terms of, hey, I'm supposed to run a custom query for somebody once a month, as opposed to I'm supposed to deliver reports to all of our customers once a month. That custom query, there may be times when you have to wait. You need to define the expectations, what they need to be due. Determine the performance of duties, and then finally you want to share whatever measurement you're doing with your employees. You want to make sure that your team is all on the same page about the metrics that you're collecting, when you're collecting them, and how you get things done. So I will say that perfection is the enemy of good. Whenever you start looking at anything in a management perspective, but particularly measurement, seeking perfection often stifles action. So sometimes you plan too much and you never commit. And the idea is that you want to really begin to focus on spending the most of your information to complete 80% of the task, and then realizing that the remaining 20% may never get done. You need to decide when done is and ship it. People want working services and working software, but the goal is that in reality, you need to be able to figure out when you're done. And I'll give you an example of that from a management perspective. That I have two employees, two DBAs, and I'll call them Bob and Rob, mainly because their names are not Bob and Rob, but they are eerily similar in shape and function, and people often get them confused. But Bob is my go-to guy. They're both senior DBAs. They both have been with the company about the same amount of time. But Bob's really the go-to guy. He's the one that most people know and interact with, and Bob has got a lot of expertise. He's got a lot of problem solving, a lot of influence, a lot of decision making. And what I've tried to illustrate with this neat little diagram is the fact that Bob and Rob's skill sets are different right now. And so my goal is I wanted to move into redundancy and really elevate Rob up to the level of Bob, right? I really wanted to have two go-to people, et cetera, that were able to do the same set. But after about 6 months of training, what it turns out is that Rob was able to get about 80% of Bob's job done, and Bob was able to do some other things. And what I also found is that Rob was able to do some things that Bob was unable to do. And I had to step back and realize that, there was no way that I was going to get complete 100% coverage between these two talented and skilled individuals, and that in some cases, Bob was still going to be the go-to guy. Bob was still going to be the person that most people reach out. But getting Rob up to the level where I got at least 80% coverage between the two of them meant that I was a lot further along than I was when I started. And it was also pretty sufficient. If Bob had to take a couple of days of vacation off and something didn't get done, most of the work that he was doing in that area that couldn't get done by Rob could wait. And we needed to figure out that, that's how we plan for resources in our department. But the ultimate goal was me having to get into that mindset of I don't have to have two things being absolutely 100% perfect and redundant, that 80% is good enough, and the amount of time that I spent to get them up to that level was good enough. Now, I still have to invest in maintaining this balance. I still have to direct issues and responsibilities over to Rob at times, because people will still tend to go to Bob first. But ultimately, the balance is a lot better off than it was. If you're curious about how I did that, one of the things is that as DBAs, there always is a support functionality. I implemented an on-call process and made them flip every week, so that Bob and Rob were always flipping every week. And then I also monitor the amount of time that Rob reached out to Bob to get help with the problem, and worked with him to reduce that amount to give him the confidence to move forward. So, having said all of that and talked about how managers need to pick a different path and move down a different road from being technical, I do want to encourage you as a manager from a technical background that you need to find some time to stay technical. Bad managers have no clue what their team is doing. I'm struggling right now because I've taken on a lot of responsibility with virtualization, network administration, and Windows administration, and I'm a database person by heart. I've always dealt in SQL Server, and particularly from the development perspective, where I haven't had to do a lot of the operational work. And so I'm struggling now, because if I have somebody tell me it takes them a week to patch a set of servers, I have to go with what they say, because I don't know. I'm spending more and more time trying to understand that world, because it is part of my responsibility. And it gives me an opportunity to have more realistic demands or expectations. I can tell if my engineers are giving me accurate estimates or if they're giving me fluff estimates. I can help provide necessary resources, and by that I mean, if an engineer comes to me and says, hey, I want to go take some training in Linux, and we don't have any Linux servers, I have to question that. Why are they doing that? Is that because this is something they think we ought to move into? Or is this just something that they're trying to pad their own resume? But I need to know enough about the area that I'm working in to get there. So as a technical manager, I need to understand the concepts. I kind of need to be up to date on the latest technology, but not necessarily in the weeds. I'm playing around right now with SQL 2016 just because I'm interested in it, but I'm not necessarily diving deep into the fundamentals and administrative topics. It's really just kind of playing and understanding what's out there. As a manager, I'm not expected to support this. I'm expected to build a team of people that can support it. So I need to at least be aware of the functionality, but I can let some of these things, these day-to-day things, go. The temptation is, however, is that you shouldn't overdo the time to stay technical. As a technical manager, understand the issues. You're not a team player. You're the manager. The goal is that you're not trying to be just another person in the support queue pulling items and doing some work. There's times when it might be appropriate for you to do that if you really want to understand how problems are being solved. But your goal is really you're doing that within a certain restricted amount of time. Your goal is to really get the big picture, the big vision, not to handle the day-to-day issues. And at the same time, you want to avoid being what I call the professor. I've worked for a few managers in the past that I really respected, but they were the ones that really knew the details and the minutiae of getting into things. Uh, and at times, that was the detriment to them in terms of building up a team because, you know, I would find myself going to them to ask a question to figure out how to do something, not as a sounding board, but they would come back and tell you should do this, you should do this, you should do this. And really, a good manager, again, sets the vision, sets the goals, sets the principles, but allows the team to begin to define the standards in the product and how they're going to change it. I will also say that you know, this is kind of an American analogy, but there was a television show several years ago called Married with Children, and a character by the name of Kelly Bundy. And Kelly Bundy was supposed to know some trivia information. And the long story short of it is the more information you put in, the more she lost at the other side. There is a balancing act. There's only so much information we can retain. And if you want to be a good manager, you need to be filling your head with management topics and management skills and expect that your technical skills are going to slide somewhat. There's things that I knew 5 years ago that I could do, you know, blindfolded. Sitting down at a computer and be able to know how to pinpoint a problem on a database, or look at a design issue and say, yeah, that's not quite right, or know how to draft a create statement for a table with a primary key, with a named primary key. I can do all of that, you know, no problem. You know, I'm finding as I'm getting further down this path of managing more than just databases, a lot of that stuff is not at ready disposal. I'm having to go look up some of the old things in cases where I need to know it. And that's normal. That's expected. So, again, my goal is to build my team, to understand the business, to understand the role of IT within an organization, not necessarily to have this hands-on information. So, finally, or getting toward the end of the stack anyway, processes decay. No matter what you do as a manager, you will find that over time, things begin to settle into a form of entropy. And what happens is that any process that you've established, if you don't tend to it, is going to decay. If you set up a help desk system for your database administrators and you don't periodically check the quality of the tickets that are going to get entered into it, they're going to decay. People are going to take shortcuts, going to figure out how to get things faster. They're going to skip the things that they feel that are a waste of time. You need to be able to step in and intervene and focus on what gets measured. So what gets measured gets managed. If you're looking at using Mars or Conman and you're not checking those boards periodically, you need to find some time and do that. Focus on your key metrics. Be consistent. Refresh staff on it. Keep it simple. And change processes when it makes sense. So that was a lot of information. We covered a lot of things in a very, very fast amount of time. And again, I apologize for some of the technical difficulties that we've had. But if you have any questions, I'd love to answer it. I'll put my contact information up there, and I'll make this slide deck available because I think there's some good bits and it's standalone. So thank you all for your time. Thanks for listening. Do you guys have any questions?
Thank you very much, Stuart. It was a very good session. You raised some good points and sentences to think about. Very, very good. And I have to say I'm really impressed about the making the Kanban in SSRS. It sounds challenging.
I need to do a blog post on it and show how we did it. It really, I actually found somebody else's blog post. They had done it with an Access database and done it. It really is just a set of sub-reports. Mm-hmm. It's not, you know, if you, the hardest thing to do is getting your underlying system set up in such a way that you can arrange things in columns. But once you've done that, it really, the reporting part of it is easy. So
cool, very impressive. We have a
Well, it sounds like I lost you for a second. Hello?
I think I muted myself. Can you hear me now?
Yeah, I can hear you now. Yes.
So the question is how to get over the fear of being a manager.
How to get over the fear of being a manager.
That's right.
Yeah, I guess there's two ways I could interpret that, so I'm not sure which one it is. One is the fear of moving into management, or the fear of once now you're a manager and now you've got some indecisiveness. And really, I wish I could say that there was a magic pill that you could take for that, but once you become a manager and become to do these responsibilities, the important thing to realize is that you're going to make mistakes just like your team is going to make mistakes. You have to move forward and learn from those mistakes. But good managers make good managers, and by that I mean is that I've been blessed to have a couple of people in my life that have invested some time and some energy in me and have conversations. So just like you strive to build a relationship with your directs, you need to find ways to build that relationship with your manager, and that will alleviate a lot of that concern over the decisions that you're going to make, et cetera, because they're going to recognize they should be able to give you the feedback that when you make a mistake and help you learn from it, and that will minimize a lot of the fear that you have for future interactions.
Cool. So there's another good question. How to handle a rude member?
How to handle a rude manager?
Yeah, a rude member, a team member, I guess.
I have, in part my French, I have a no asshole rule on my team. If I have someone that it's a disciplinary problem that they're, and I will admit that, one of the interesting things about working in IT is that we often deal with a lot of people that can be very, very technically skilled, but have some very, very poor social skills. The organization that I work in has a great method for forcing people to do annual and periodic reviews, and I actually factor in communication and team building as part of their skills that I measure. If you have continuing problems, you have to phase that out of your team, whether it be transferring the person to another team, finding a way to do it. But I would much rather have, it goes back to what I was talking about, having a good developer, having somebody that wants to learn and to collaborate. I would much rather have somebody that has less than excellent technical skills but amazing collaboration than somebody that is an amazing technical person in horrible collaboration skills. You just can't build an environment off that. So you have to figure out as a manager to make the decisions that, you give them time to change and to grow. You work with them to change and grow. If they don't change, they don't grow, you phase them out. You find ways to get rid of them. So.
This is a good one. Women, for the most part, are isolated from the IT discussions. How can we make men pay attention to our ideas? What would be your recommendation for women management?
Wow.
That's what I said when I saw the question.
Is going to go back to the fact that when you start talking about management, interdisparity in IT, first and foremost, I would say relying on your HR department to help build that culture. Again, the company that I work for, I'm very blessed that we have an HR team that they spend some time talking about recruiting more women and more minorities and spending time to help build a more definitive team. And then you need to practice what you expect. In other words, as a manager, if your expectation is that you want to focus on on getting product done and getting things done and having divergent voices and different perspectives, and you build a team that has that, you have to spend the time to listen to those people and to work with it. Your team members will emulate what you do. So if as a manager, particularly if you are a male manager, and you're not spending the time listening to your female employees or your female counterparts, your team members are going to pick up on that. They're going to observe that and do it as well. You need to, so first and foremost, work with HR, figure out what the culture is to encourage diversity, and then begin to practice those beliefs yourself and encouraging diversity, and spend some time. The important thing is, you need to, by demonstrating that you're going to listen to a team member, you want to also make sure that you are not moving into a paternalistic mode where you're subconsciously protecting a team member. You want to make sure that they get the opportunity to speak for themselves and to defend their ideas and encourage people to participate. I will say that there's always, culture and gender are always tough issues to deal with, because you're right. IT has always been a primarily white male-dominated profession, and there are certain cultures and certain gender stereotypes that encourage people to refrain from contributing, and you need to find ways to make sure that equal voices are heard. One exercise that I do is we borrowed this from Scrum is that if we have a face-to-face team meeting, we bounce a ball to each other, and whoever has the ball has the floor, and they can have the floor for as long as they need it. So we'll literally pass an object, and that person's got the opportunity to speak. It's a stupid game, but it is a game that kind of helps get a lot of different voices and ideas on the floor. I have been known in remote meetings to control the microphones of people, and if I feel like people are not being heard, I unmute their mics and mute everybody else and give them the opportunity to speak. It's an ongoing battle. Don't get me wrong. You have to do that. The trick is to find ways to hear from various corners of your team as best you can.
Great. So, Stuart, thank you very much. We actually have some more questions, but we really have to finish. Do you have a blog? Maybe I can send you the questions, and maybe you'll blog about it.
My email address is on the screen. It's Stuart@codegumbo.com. My blog, which I have been horrible about updating recently, is at www.codegumbo.com, and in both cases you can reach me there. And in fact, this slide deck is available at my blog, so at codegumbo.com. So.
Great. So, guys, if we didn't manage to answer questions, please send Stuart an email. I will also send Stuart the questions. And Stuart, thanks again. It was a very great webinar. And thanks everyone for listening. And have fun.
All right. Thank you very much. I appreciate it, y'all. Have a good day.
Thanks, Stuart. You too. Bye-bye.